This section is all about attachments. I'm going to start by adding attachments. So open up the add attachments.py script from the attachments folder. The feature layer object has an attachment manager that you access with the attachments property. From the attachment manager, we can use the add method to add an attachment to a feature. Let's head over to documentation for the add method. Here we have the add method, and it adds an attachment to a feature layer. The operation is performed on a feature service feature resource. The add method has two required parameters: the OID of the feature that you want to add the attachment to. It does say here it is a required string, but it can be a string or an integer. And then we have the file path parameter, which is a string that represents the path to the file to be uploaded as a new feature attachment. The content type, size, and name of the attachment will be derived from the uploaded file. An attachment folder has been added to the course material. In here we have two new folders, one that is downloads that is currently empty, one that has park trails and then has the name of a subset of the park trails from our park trails feature layer, and within those there is one or more JPEG files. At the root of the attachment folder we also have two JPEGs. In our first example we are going to add the battle site image here to our trail viewpoints layer, and we'll also add this FDM statue image to our viewpoint reviews table. So let's head back to our Python script. Up top we have our usual GIS class import, and we're also going to import the OS module from the standard Python library to help us out with some file paths in our third example. We first access ArcGIS Online using the GIS class and supplying in our home string. We'll assign the GIS object to a variable called AGOL. We'll then use our GIS object and access the content manager and use the get method, supplying in our feature service item ID, which I'll paste in now from my notepad. The content manager get method returns an item object that will assign to a variable called item. In our first two examples, we are going to add an attachment for a feature in a feature layer and also add an attachment for a feature in a table. We are interested in our trail viewpoints layer, so we're using our item object and using the layers property, which is a list of feature layer objects, and accessing the first feature layer object from that list and assigning that feature layer object to a variable called FL. Our feature layer object has a property called attachments that is an attachments manager object that has the add method for adding attachments to a feature. We saw in the documentation that there are two required parameters: OID, which says it should be a string, but I'm going to show it can be an integer, so I'm going to set that to an OID of 3, and then we have the file path to the attachment that we want to add. And I want the attachment to be the battle site JPEG from our attachments folder. Adding an attachment for a table is almost identical. Here we're using our item object tables property, which returns a list of table objects, and we're accessing the second table object from that list, which is our viewpoint reviews, and we'll assign that table object a variable called table. The table object also has the attachments property where we can access the add method and supply in an OID. Here we're using a string of 1, and we're setting the file path to be our FDM statue JPEG from the attachments folder. On both occasions, when we're calling the add method to add attachments, we're assigning the calling of the add method to a variable called status, and then we'll print the status to screen. Now before running, I'm going to pop on over to ArcGIS Online. Here I'm in our Park Trails feature service. I'm going to go to the Data tab, and here I have Trail Viewpoints. Go to Column Visibility and show the Object ID. We're going to be updating Object ID of 3, which is our made up battle site, and we are going to add a single attachment. I go to the Viewpoint Reviews and show the Object ID. We're going to be accessing Object ID of 1, which is the FDM statue, and adding an attachment. So let's head back to our script. I'm going to run. Our script is complete. We can see our add attachment result that was returned from the add method. Now this object ID here is a little bit deceiving. We set object ID of 3 for the first one for the feature in our feature layer, and it still returned object ID 1. This could actually be the attachment ID rather than the object ID. But anyway, we did get success through that both of the attachments were added. So we'll head back over to ArcGIS Online. I'll go back into our trail viewpoints layer. And we have our made up battle site here. That was object ID 3. And if I scroll over, we can see we now have a single attachment in there. If I click in, we have our battle site JPEG. I can also click over here on the right hand side to view attachment and see it a bit better. If I go to our viewpoint reviews, which was a table where we updated a record in the table to have an attachment, and that was our FDM statue. I scroll over and I check out the attachment. Okay, it's not quite a statue, it's just me freezing in January doing a park run in Nace. But we have successfully added an attachment to a feature in a feature layer and in a table. Now if I go to the Park Trails feature layer, our trail name is unique. In the last example, I'm going to show you how we can use this unique attribute to then access the object ID and update the features based on a folder with the same name. If you think back to the attachments that I showed, we have this park_trails folder. And if I click in there, the folders in our Park Trails folder match some of the names for the park trails in our feature layer. We can see here under trail name, we have FDM Trail, Loop a Loop, and Lord Clon's Way, for example. Let's head back to our script. I'll comment out the first two examples, and I'll open up the third example, which I'm just going to walk through. So here we're accessing our Park Trails feature layer. And we're getting the feature layer object for our park trails and assigned to a variable called FL. We have our root directory, which is our park trails folder in our attachments folder. I'm going to create a dictionary where the folder name in the park trails is the key and the value is a list of file paths to any JPEG found in the folder in park trails. Here we're going to use dictionary comprehension. So I'm going to create a variable called filesdict. We want the folder name, and then we want a list of any JPEGs that sit in that folder, and we're using our OS module to achieve the required dictionary. I'm actually going to print the files dict the screen. I'm going to comment out the rest of this example for now, and I'm going to run the script, and we can see the output for the dictionary created. The dictionary has a key where it is the trail name, and then it is a list of JPEGs that we want to add as attachments for that trail name. I'll comment out printing the dictionary, and I'll uncomment the next part of the workflow. We're going to create a second dictionary that is an OID dictionary where the key is the trail name and the value is the OID from the feature layer. So here we're using dictionary comprehension once more. We're using a feature layer query method to return just the object ID and the trail name. And then we're setting the trail name as the key and the object ID as the value. And if I run this script, seems like I'm just getting a connection failure. Probably a weak internet. I'll run again. And we can see the dictionary printed the screen where we have our trail name and the object ID associated with that trail name. Now that we have our two dictionaries created, I'm going to comment out printing out that OID dictionary and open up the rest of the workflow. So we have our files dictionary, which is the name of the folder that matches the trail name. So for each folder, which is the folder name, and the files list in our files dictionary, we're going to print the folder name. We're going to get the OID associated with that trail name by using our OID dict and supplying in the folder name. And then for each file in the files list, we're going to call our attachments manager add method, supplying in the OID that we grabbed from our OID dictionary and the file path for each file. So essentially what is happening here, the code is going to dig into our Park Trails folder, and it's going to iterate over each of these subfolders, go in and get each JPEG file and add it as an attachment in our Park Trail feature layers where the trail name is the same as the folder. So I'm going to run this script. You can see here it is gone to FDM trail and added in 3 attachments, Loop a Loop 2 attachments, Lord Clon's Way 1 attachment, Sleeve Gap 2 attachments. And we were returned success true for each and all of those attachments. Let's head back over to ArcGIS Online. I'm going to refresh the page. I'll go into our Park Trails and scroll across, and we can see all the attachments have been added successfully. Make sure to continue on to the next video in this series, and also make sure to subscribe. Take care.